Welcome to Planned Cost Management. The Planned Cost Management process is under the Planning Process Group.
So, usually the planned costing, the planned cost management is the process where you derive your governance structure, the process and the procedures of how you are going to manage cost in your project. So, as an input, the scope is obviously an input for this, and the schedule is also obviously an input of the baseline, because by the scope you know the entire the WBS, the data is there. By the time of your schedule, the time plan, then you know you had broken down into activity level. If you can recall what we discussed last time, the decomposition, where you break down the WBS into minute activity level to get the time plan, and that will be the basis to get the costing also. Or you can do a rolling wave planning method, where you try to break down things that are current much as possible into minute activities, and maybe things down the line few months ahead might be at a bit of a high level. So those were the two tools that we used to break activities, if you can recall the last session. The project charter is also very important. As I've been always telling in the class, the project charter will give you the budget summary, or the so you as a project manager knows that your costing cannot exceed this budget. The project charter will give you the summary budget of your entire project. Any project approval documents will be very handy, and sometimes the customer agreement will be one of the main inputs, because it will contain the price for the customer of your project, and then obviously your costing should be less than that. Some other environment factors that you can take into consideration: the exchange rates. As you know, these days exchange rate is going for a 6. So exchange rates, manpower rates in the industry. What are the options that are available? We come down to in greater detail in a few moments of time. So what regional resources that you have. Then again, the culture and the structure of your organization, because this planned cost management is all about defining the guideline and the process of the cost management. So then the culture and the structure of your organization is important, as well as the customer's organization is important. As also, you as a project manager need to understand what is the procedure of your current organization. This is the reimbursement procedure. This is the taxi reimbursement procedure. This is the food reimbursement procedure. This is the overtime approval procedure of your organization. So these things has to need a good understanding, because now you are going to see, you're trying to develop your process and the guidelines so that it can be given to your team. This is how the cost is going to get managed in your project. So here, of course, it's expert judgment. Basically, this is about policies and procedures. So so you as a project manager, basically it's expert judgment, and you can see how the other organization or other software development companies do in the industry. So that can be taken as an input when you're deciding how you are going to manage your cost in your project. You can have meetings with your sponsor and manager or any other stakeholder that's involved, especially your finance manager in this case, when it comes to costing, your financial head, when deciding how your cost can be managed in your project. And you can also start thinking about the alternatives, how you're going to fund your project, whether it's by equity or whether you have to buy the debt by taking a loan, or whether your company has sufficient cash amount to fund this project. So you can have a discussion with your financial head with that. And then also, since now you are fully aware of the activity level from your previous exercise, and each activity level, the resources, the capability of the resources, you are fully aware. Now you can actually start making decisions whether you are going to outsource certain resources or getting foreign resources in. If you are in a bit of a if your project involves making something, then of course whether it is making or renting equipments or renting PCs, renting laptops, or whether you're buying laptops for your project. So these things, as a project manager, now it's time to think the different methods of acquiring in order to control your cost in the given budget. So the cost management plan, the governing part of it, basically will give you, you will finalize with your finance head or with your core stakeholder team. Basically, this is the unit of measure that we are going to use, whether your project is going to get costed in dollars or your project is going to get costed in rupees. And this is the level of precision that we will have of your when you're costing it. And this is the level of accuracy we will allow. An acceptable range of about 10% plus or minus error margin. Error margin. So these things can be discussed with your stakeholders and get finalized when as the main guideline for your project. And also, we come up in a few moments time. There's something called a control account. If you have done financing for your A-level, or I don't know, for your high studies finance, there's something called a concept of a control account. This is nothing but basically you have an entire budget. If you have an entire budget for your project, but then you might subdivide it into control accounts. Say maybe phase one, you can put all the cost in phase one. You will allocate a budget for your phase one, and you can put all the costs involved in phase one into one bucket, and then then we'll see whether you have cost overrun for phase one or phase one or not. So you can have small control accounts. So, I mean, each WBS structure work breakdown structure can have a control account. Say, for example, for user training. So maybe your project is $1 million project, but for user training, each subpart you have a small budget allocated, and then you track. For UAT training, this is the actual expense that for training, this is actual expense that you have incurred for resources and for food and transport and booking rooms, for projectors and other equipments. This is the actual cost you have incurred against the amount allocated for training within the overall massive budget. So that you will, the day that you find there is an issue and you have overrun your cost of your project, definitely you can actually, if you identify it like that, you will have a better explanation. No, maybe you have your project is cost overrun $50,000, $10,000 from training. We ran our original budget. We ran our original budget for $10,000 from training, $20,000 from food expenses for the entire development team. On the development team effort, so that you can actually find the root cause properly. Hope you got it there. So you can have control accounts at each and every level, and it's for tracking your expenses. Got it? Say, for example, you're building a house, then you have your budget. Then you allocate for doors and windows for carpentry. I am allocating 400,000. For slab work, I am allocating another 500,000. For electrical work, I am allocating another 100,000. And you track each and everything separately. For electrical bus, for equipments that you have purchased, the light fittings you have purchased, the amount of wiring you have purchased, and how much you have paid for the electrical bus, then it should be within the 100,000 that you budgeted. And you track cost and see you ran over 50,000 for electrical work. Then for wood carpentry, for the wood you have purchased, and for the carpentry bus you have given, you're paid out, you track that cost separately. So each WBS will be your electrical work, your carpentry work. And then there'll be control account. Your control accounts will be carpentry work. You track costs separately, and for electrical work you track costs separately. Right. So so basically, for control, what this statement says is that for controlling purposes like that, in a large project, you give a small ID for a controlling, because in a large project there can be several control accounts, several sub components you will be controlling for your financial purposes. So then this is how you give the link. This is how you give the control account a numbering sequence. This is how that control account and your activity has to get tracked. Maybe you're using a system, so that when you enter in your system, if you as a project manager has to enter in your project system, the actual cost incurred, actual bills incurred, then you will select that activity. This bill is for this activity, which you go to that control account. This bill is for the carpentry bars, but it will go to the control account on the carpentry work. Okay, so the carpentry activity should be tagged with this control account. So this actually talks about that. Then in control thresholds, at which point you will trigger a red alarm, and after 10% of 3% of budget exceed, I will give you a red alarm. So there is the escalation process, and what is the percentage that the control threshold that you take corrective actions and preventive actions. And also any rules of performance measurement. We will do it in a short while. There is something called earned value management. We'll discuss in a short time. And how is that calculation is performed? What is the methodology of that calculation of earned value management? Or what is the assumptions and what is the methodology that you're going to do? That can be decided in your managed cost plan. And any reporting format or any descriptions or any additional details will be there in your cost management plan. And any procedures, you can define any procedures of cost recording. This is how we'll record the cost, and this is how the currency exchange rates that we take. Sometimes the exchange rate gain or exchange loss. These days is exchange rate loss. This is how you account for it. So this has to get agreed with your finance team before the project.